Welcome back to our Crushing Comics Book Club. We are here reading and discussing Batman by Grant Morrison, and today we're to a pretty critical part of that run. It is Batman R.I.P. in issues 676 through 681. They're contained in the Batman by Grant Morrison omnibus, which two of us are reading from. I am reading digitally. It's all on DC Universe as well, and there's many other ways to get these issues. I'm joined by Harry and Fariha, and we are going to go deep because this has a lot of connections to past stories, especially in the Black Case book. It makes me really happy that we read the Black Case book. Before we get underway, our standard note to you is that Grant Morrison goes by they, them pronouns, so you will hear us use them as we should. If we make a mistake, you'll hear us hopefully correct ourselves and just keep moving. When you make a mistake with somebody's pronouns, just correct yourself. It's not about you, it's about them. And if you caused any offense, please apologize. But if it's just in conversations such as this one, the best thing you can do is form a good habit of using their correct pronouns and moving on with your conversation. Batman R.I.P. starting in issue 676 to me feels like the first big, heavy moment of Morrison's run. But before we can fully get there, there's this little slice, little sliver of a story in DC Universe Zero, which is in the omnibus, right?
Yes, it is. It is, and it's just
Yes.
that part of DC Universe Zero is in its entirety leads right into RAP.
Okay, so I'm just going to explain what DC Universe Zero is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Harry to talk about the actual story. This was one of the many lead-ups to Final Crisis, and it's kind of just every one of the major Justice League books gets a couple of pages to kind of say, like, here's the world-shattering thing our hero is going to focus on. So it's got Superman, it's got Green Lantern, it's got Wonder Woman, it's got Batman, but Batman's is a much smaller slice of stuff than these other things, which are much bigger in scope. Batman is very much a one-on-one conversation, well, a one-sided conversation with Joker in Arkham. And here I will turn it over to Harry to talk a little bit more about what we should be looking out for in this brief story.
Yeah, so I think this is a really lovely little two-page teaser. I mean, that's what it is, but it's constructed in such a nice way where, this, first of all, this is the first look you have at the Joker since his kind of dark transformation in that prose issue right at the beginning of this run. And I think it's fairly terrifying. The design for the Joker in this RAP book is excellent. And, this is basically positioning Batman as this figure who is wholly confident in himself, who is completely ready for whatever threat's coming. He knows that the black glove or something, some force is pressing in on him, and he's ready for whatever that is. Now we're going to quickly see that he might be a little bit more confident than he should be. what this what the story also has is that it establishes the red black motif that's going to become a major thing, both textually and then obviously visually throughout this arc. And it also kind of brings up this man's hand kind of concept that pays off much later in the arc. So, considering it's just 2 pages, I think this has a lot in it, and it gets across this super foreboding, creepy mood that we're gonna definitely feel in RIP. And just speaking personally, this is the Batman RIP is the first Batman comic I read in a comic shop. This was the first thing that I was acquainted with. So this is one that's, even though at the time I didn't understand it that well, I had to reread it a few times. This is definitely one that really is near and dear to my heart, even though it has some flaws and some structural issues that you can take or leave depending on how charitable you're feeling about Morrison. But we'll get into all that.
Are you just saying that preemptively so we're not rude to you about this?
I like this so much. You guys not liking it wouldn't destroy me, but I'm anticipating any kind of opinion because this book's insane.
It's okay, Harry. That's how Peter and Tyler starts every Claremont run with me.
Okay, I made it. I'm here.
No, this was like Harry. This was also my first Batman story that wasn't an original graphic novel.
Wow!
Really? Wow!
Yeah, this was the first in continuity, Batman story that I read. So I actually went and verified,
That's
and
awesome.
this was it. Yeah. So. And then and I'm going to share what I feel about it later. But the thing is, no, the Joker part were the one that's scary, isn't it? When you can't see what's coming. It's really terrifying. Especially coming from Joker, because that's how he is. Like he's such this like agent of chaos, and he necessarily doesn't think things through, and then just wait for Batman to react to his shenanigans. And he was like, "Oh, now you are on my turf."
Hmm.
I have so many thoughts about these few pages. I feel like we could go a whole hour and I could talk about every panel. I think I would highly suggest that you read it before, and then once you get to the end, go back and read it again. Because
Hmm.
now that I'm looking at it again, as I have been for prepping for the show, I'm just getting so many different things. Let me try to encapsulate a few of them. Joker here is representing a few different things. One thing that I think we sometimes lose in the whole the Joker's wild, the Joker's an agent of chaos
Yeah.
is he's literally a card without a suit, right? Like he is a wild card. And I think that
Hmm.
sometimes people take that as like, oh, Joker's wild, he's crazy, he's chaotic. But it's literally him saying, like, there's the black and there's the red and there's me. And Batman's really trying to like force him into this corner of like, are you aligned with them? Do you know something about them? But the
Yeah.
whole point, and I think a huge theme in how Morrison uses Joker is he's an independent force. He's on whose ever side furthers the
Hmm.
chaos. And I think that this is like a good recentering. For all the focus that there is on dealing the deck, it ends on the focus on the Joker card, which has black and red on it and is meant to be seen really separately from the deck. So I do think
Hmm.
that that is like a theme to think about. The other thing is that Joker is playing with this idea of dealing a very specific hand of cards to try to send Batman a message. Or is he? Is he really just giving a tarot reading using the cards? And we get into this in this arc that, cards have symbolic meaning. Morrison loves this kind of stuff. And it's kind of speaking to like when you look into the face of randomness or chaos, which Joker
Hmm.
represents being the Joker, you see whatever you choose to see. And there's definitely, this is drilled home getting into the issue we're about to read, Batman 666, with a literal Rorschach test that's being shown to Joker, which kind of like holds the mirror up to the mirror. Like if Joker lets you see the best or the worst or whatever you want to see, what happens when you ask that thing to look into the ink blot? So I think that study it carefully, but don't go overboard. Like if you can't find the deep meaning in every panel, that's fine. But I really and let yourself have a flight of fancy with it. The motions the Joker's making to his head and being killed, his hands on the table, Batman being silhouetted back just to eyeballs. Get from it the thing you want to get from it, because it is in itself a Rorschach test for you to
Yeah.
see the thing that you want to see in this Batman Joker antagonistic relationship. Yeah, I'm
And one other
vibrating.
thing
I
to
know.
note
It's
to
great.
all the other thing to note to all the rogue gallery or people who want to take down Batman, do it on your own. Don't bring
I
Joker into
know.
it.
Such a
Like,
rookie move in
it's not.
this.
It's never gonna end well
Ah,
for you.
I love
Yeah,
it.
it's. I mean, it's like
This is the one book.
he's gonna change the rule. Change the playbook. So just do your own thing. Don't bring him in. Keep him in Arkham. Do your own thing. Take the credit.
Well, and also it's kind of like everybody always triggers their own doom by involving Joker. I'm not trying to just mansplain the thing you said. It just made me think of a different
Yeah.
thing. Like Batman kind of sets this course of events into play by even going and questioning the Joker. And then the Black Glove sets it into play by kind of like just yeah. There's no you change your own future by asking Joker these questions.
And I've said this before, but there's such like something in the water at this time because this came out, I believe, like in the middle of 2008 or what have you, which was the exact same time as The Dark Knight. And both of these stories are, in a sense, people making plans and the Joker just completely like smashing them to pieces on principle and not being interested in even the concept of forming things or structures in any way. And this is just one that's got that kind of Morrison eccentricness, let's call it.
Well, now let's tackle Batman 676 and 677 because they are kind of the two issues that lead to the gooey center of this story. This finds a few things happening. We're in this state of affairs where we left the last arc, where Batman is with Jezebel Jet. She knows that he's Bruce Wayne. Crime in Gotham, as far as we can see, is almost completely eradicated. But Batman is he's disassociating, which I'm going to get into a little bit more deeply when it's my turn. But I want to keep up the trend of going to Harry first on these, since he's got the most context on them, to talk a little bit about what's happening in 676 and 677, which then ends on Zor and R. So we're not going to get into Zor and R until we finish this go round. Harry, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, so what I love the most about this opening act, this first omnibus, is so much as we've gone into is just this establishing and discussion of, Bruce Wayne's identity. Like, who is this person? Who is Batman? How do they interact? How much room does one have for the other? And seeing how that kind of builds and changes through the course of this when he meets Jezebel. And then, this basically is the arc where it's saying, all of these ideas of identity and personality are becoming manifest, where the Black Glove is launching its final attack and literally assaulting Batman's identity, his psyche, trying to just shatter his idea of himself and as a human. And it's all these things that they've been hinting at and playing with throughout this entire arc, or book, I should say, that have now been made into something very literal and real, or as literal as something can be in a Morrison comic. It's all pretty much, and take your pick if it's real or not. What I also like about it is that, it's Batman R.I.P, but the first page is the shadowy Batman figure and Robin saying Batman and Robin will never die, because this is an interesting series where it is both the end of this first act but also the start of the second, which is very heavily focused on Batman as a symbol or an ideal or all of these classic things, and this is very much speaking to that.
Fariha, what about you?
So, talking about the first page, the Batman and Robin will never die, that's a different Batman and Robin, right? You don't want to get ahead of it, but yeah, that's a different than we are seeing throughout this. The one thing I was going to say though, it's like, because this is my second read and I actually remembered quite a lot of it, which kind of surprised me. I remember the first time when I was reading it, I was so angry by Jezebel Jet that everything I could not fathom anything else, because I absolutely hate female characters who comes into a man's life and then tries to change it. I mean, I absolutely abhor that. I mean, the only reason you could do it is if you are married and you have a kid, that I understand. And you suddenly realize that you're the father of your child is doing something different. But otherwise, it's this one nagging trope about, women just wants to change their partner. This nonsense. And the whole time she was just going on and on about it. I think the first time I was reading it, I'm like, shut up. But this time, when I was reading it, because I knew the twist, I was like, oh, she's trying to confuse him. So this time it read so much better, and I was much more entertained by it. That this was she was trying to change all of this, confuse him, trying to keep on saying that, is this something you want to do? And it would kind of put him in a weird footing. And then, so that I think, kind of jived with me so well. And then Alfred goes to see a movie. So that was nice. But yeah, which is nice. He's like, hey, Alfred, I'm going to go cook for Jezebel. Go see a movie. So that was something. But yeah, and there was other things going on, which was a little scatterbrained, but I'm like, Peter will put it together in words that I will understand.
Talking about 676 and 677, I really think the way that I found my way through these is there are a few key quotes that Morrison gives to their characters, where the characters are kind of guiding us through the way we're supposed to be thinking about Batman. And I think that that's really how I found my way into it on this read. Alfred says close to the beginning of 676, I watch him go through cycles. Try not to worry so much, Master Tim. Alfred is commenting upon Batman kind of letting this woman into his life, and then also letting her into the fact that she's Batman, and Tim's I don't know if I like this. Girls dating my dad. but you know, Alfred's comment can be seen as being made more holistically of like, you know, Batman goes through grimmer parts, he goes through more happy-go-lucky parts. Like the Batman character is infinitely flexible, and even the way that this is about to go and the Final Crisis stuff is all very deep and heavy, and then it's going to come out the other side and be super, super lighthearted as we get to Batman and Robin. So I think that that's like, you know, a thesis statement from Morrison. But then Bruce says this really interesting thing. He says, I think it was Bruce, that all these sensory deprivation things are a complete rehearsal while living of the experience of death, which I found super fascinating because it took me back to that first issue in this Morrison read of like, who's the mask? Is Batman the mask? Is Bruce Wayne the mask? Because if we're looking at these deprivation experiences he keeps putting himself through, whether it's, you know, Dr. Hurt's tank or the hidden city where we just were, and Ra's al Ghul where he went to meditate, all these things, is he really killing all of himself, or is it really about making sure one side of him can exist independently of the other side? You know, like he has to be able to kill Bruce Wayne a little bit to be Batman. He has to be able to kill Batman a little bit to be Bruce Wayne, which really comes to play in this arc because it's all about this kind of Batman backup personality, ultimately. You know, spoilers for what we're going to be talking about 3 minutes from now. And so it's really interesting to me that he's basically rehearsing all the things an enemy could do to him. They can destroy his life as Bruce Wayne. They can make it so it's unfeasible to be Batman. We've seen that. He had to be Starman one time, right? And he's got to be, because as Alfred says, Master Bruce has a very clear idea of human perfection towards which he constantly strives, you understand. This is part of his idea of perfection, is that he has to have this perfected version of all these different parts from him that are distinct. But the final thing that I'll pull out from these two issues is this leads in a way to disassociation, which both is healthy for maintaining Batman, but unhealthy on a personal level. You know, we see him with a wound he's not attending to. He doesn't realize that Tim has gone. He's hyper fixated on the black glove. And this hyperfixation serves him as Batman, but this is, you know, from his perspective, he's killed Bruce Wayne temporarily, and he's even killed his physical self so he can focus on the investigation, the detective work. But to everybody from outside, and Morrison does this brilliantly well, it looks like somebody disassociating. And like sometimes that's what it is when he's being Batman. I find this deeply, deeply interesting. And then piled that all on top too, they chase down this stupid parrot man. Like that's all there is left to do in Gotham, right? But although it comes back to play, as does his giving some money to this homeless person, comes back to play. And so it's kind of like Morrison being like, it all matters and nothing matters all at once. So I just think these issues contain so much.
I do want to say about the Parrot Man. That's another example. You know, you had a different reading than we did last issue, but I think the Parrot Man interaction is another example of the relative compassion or lighter touch that this Batman has compared to other interpretations, where A, he does donate a lot of money to this homeless man. And then B, there's just like one line that I just love, where Robin's like, you're on bad drugs in a Halloween suit with about a dozen cameras recording your complete loss of self-respect. And he's just like, hit me. It's like, no. And like, hey, that's just a great like rhythm of dialogue. I love that kind of Morrison stuff. They just do such nice stuff with that. But also like, they aren't going to hit this guy because this guy is struggling and in pain, even though he took a family hostage that's very similar to Batman, Bruce Wayne and his parents. It's just showing that like they aren't going to literally punch down this hard on someone who's just out of their mind in this moment, which I like.
And I'm kind of glad that Peter explained all the, deprivation tank nonsense, because, I was the whole time, I was like, this man just found a kink and he just keeps on going back to it and be like, I'm just doing it for my own self. Nah, you just got a kink. That's all. Therapy. Go to therapy. It's more helpful.
I think the brilliant thing that Morrison brings to a lot of their comic books is to say superheroes do have kinks. Kinks are real. And kinks can be fueling who they are as superheroes. Like this all exists in a continuum. Does Batman have a kink about dying? Maybe. Does that deeply have to do with him being Batman? Yes, but and I think that's why Morrison writing Wonder Woman is fascinating, because Morrison, Wonder Woman is a book that is overtly about kinks. The whole point was it was being written about bondage, enjoying submission to women, and so then to invite someone like Morrison to come and write that, I think even puts more layers on it. Haven't figured out what Superman kinks are though. I have to reread their run on Action Comics.
Apple pie.
Apple pie, just like in the American Pie movies. So I'm gonna have to put a different level of YouTube warning on this one. So look, in the background of all of this, Black Glove very suspiciously invites Bruce and Jet to this exclusive Black Glove thing, which is really what sets Bruce off. It's kind of like a scheme within a scheme to maneuver him to the place where this Zur-En-Arrh thing will work, which is like set his mind on circles within circles within circles. Like, why is the Black Glove inviting us? What do they know?
Make him more vulnerable.
Right.
What I also like about this is that, the Black Glove and the movie that Batman investigates and sends Alfred off to watch this is where it's kind of, which I love. I love that beat. Like, go watch the movie, figure it out. But like,
I'm asking you to go to the movies, Alfred.
This is starting to again bring in Simon Hurt, John Mayhew, and the star of the Black Glove movie, Mangrove Pierce. And it's kind of getting into this who is Simon Hurt and where is this person from and what is his actual identity? And a lot of that is he actually Thomas Wayne? Is he John Mayhew? Is he Mangrove Pierce? Like, what is happening? And this book doesn't really give you the answers yet, but we're going to get into all that.
Yeah. The other thing before we move on to 678, which is a doozy, is some really nice little Joker stuff here. Joker, as I already mentioned, kind of having his own moment of a Rorschach test and the bloody things he sees within that. Is it really the future? Is it what Joker wants the future to be? But then also this really delightful way that Joker is slightly gender bent here.
Yes.
He's definitely wearing some clothing, which is a little bit of a gender bend of how he's usually dressed, although that's changed by the end of this. Some of the way that his face is being shown. And again, I just think it's really interesting always to play with Joker as he's just whatever is in the eye of the beholder. He'll just stare right back at you and offer you whatever you give to him, which I think is really interesting.
And I do want to say,
it also reminded me a little bit of the visual of the death of the family. I guess the New 52, where it's a dinner scene, where it's a dinner that they.
That's a great comparison.
He got all of them in there, and then it's kind of reminded me because they were all kind of sitting like that. So I feel like Snyder probably was inspired from this.
Yeah, he probably read this page and he thought, how can I get a whole crossover out of this single Grant Morrison page?
You said it, not me. But what I like about this design, what I really like about Tony Daniel's design here is the prose issue kind of repurposes this Joker as he has become this incredibly dark, horrifying thing, like the clown at midnight. And because it's prose, you can kind of just imagine that whatever you want to be, which is a lot easier than actually visualizing it. So on one hand, it will always be a little bit more disappointing than what you've made in your mind. But on the other hand, I think Tony Daniel made a really creepy, effective looking kind of Joker while also being different and kind of gender bent, like you say. There's really not a lot. He doesn't really look like this much before or after.
I think Tony Daniel's Joker to me is a distinctly specific Joker that I like, even though I don't always like the comics that are necessarily in, because Tony Daniel then continues doing Joker in New 52, and to me it's just so iconic and specific that's a particular Joker in my mind is Tony Daniel.
I agree.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say though, that Joker is always obsessed with not necessarily killing Batman, but everyone else around him.
Well, that's the love thing.
Something that kind of stuck with him. Yeah, it's just everyone around him is going to die. Even here, I was kind of noticing, I'm okay, so he never actually thinks about killing Batman, but taking away everything else.
Now we move on to Batman 678, which is, this is wild. And if you have not listened to our casebook episode, it's really going to help you with this. You might want to just hit pause and go back and do the casebook episode. There's a few different things happening, which I'll try to just really summarize quickly and then turn it over to Harry. So Batman's basically captured in the Batcave in front of Jezebel Jet at the end of the last issue. And here we're seeing a few different streams of things happening. We're seeing Batman having a recollection of a lot of casebooky things. We're seeing Batman hallucinating potentially a cross-city odyssey with the homeless person he gave money to, who may also be dead. And then we're also seeing Tim, I think, paging through the casebook itself.
It's Tim, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
Really,
and then
really
also
hard
it
to tell.
opens with a panel of my favorite casebook story, Rainbow Pride Godzilla. So, so now I'm going to turn over to
Love
Harry.
it.
Harry, what this is, I mean, it's really easy to get lost and dislike Morrison in an issue like this because there's just so much. Help us find a center of gravity here.
All right. So first of all, I think this issue is a ton of fun because this is just showing completely unhinged Bruce Wayne out in the world, freaked out. Like this is like half a meme, but who cares? He gets injected with weapons grade crystal meth. That is a level of meth we haven't even heard of. I haven't even tried that yet. I've never done meth, but no, but basically like what this really
important disclaimers, folks.
Yeah, never done meth.
Tyler, not a doctor. Harry has never done meth. Okay,
but like what I love about this is like this reminds me, this is almost like an homage to the Black Casebook issue, Am I Really Batman? Which is all about, it really does feel that way, where he just has had a complete mental breakdown. He has a complete identity shattering, and he spends his time on the streets slowly piecing himself back together and reclaiming his identity. His identity that he finds is a much deeper, more wild thing than the return of the status quo he has in that Black Casebook story. But yeah, just there's just this interesting thing where he's hallucinating traveling with this Honor Jackson character, and this isn't like a big plot thing, but I love the page where they get kind of held up by these goons, and he beats them all up, and the last page is him and Honor Jackson just running away like as silhouettes, and like Bruce Wayne's pushing the shopping cart of all their stuff, and it's just such much like a wild adventure kind of like panel, which is so fun. I know this issue is wild, and it's just there's so much happening, but like it's like a level of fun and like depravity that is, I think Morrison does really well this arc. And it also shows us that Simon Hurt has gotten into the Batcave, and he has started wearing Thomas Wayne's Batman costume, which in the Black Casebook, when I got to this costume, I like audibly yelled in my room. I was like, oh, this is what it is. Like, because this is like seared into my brain, this costume. I think it is so powerful and distinctive. And now with this show, I know where it came from, which made me happy.
Fariha, what about you? Batman 678. Help us focus.
I know. I was all over the place.
No, I don't mean, I just mean in general. The first time I read this is the kind of Morrison issue that's very threatening to me, because you have to give a lot of yourself to the issue to get something back. And I think I'm better prepared for that now. But I think a lot of readers who have trouble with them because this kind of issue is threatening. And so I just think like you got to have something to focus on. You got to fix your eyes on a point, which is why it's not that you were unfocused. It's that the issue is threatening.
Very fair.
So this is one of my all-time favorite Batman issues,
nice.
And that's before, like even before I we read Black Casebook, because I absolutely always love the story point where it's like one of the character was not real, and it was imagination of the other character. And when you go back to read the whole story, then you see that was actually the case. So especially the fact that in the shadow that you mentioned, that Bruce Wayne is the one who is pushing the cart.
Yeah,
I always wondered, why is he the one pushing? Like when even the first time I read it, and even this time around, like even though I knew it, but this time I actually saw it, because he's pushing the cart means the other person cannot possibly be there. Even though it just because Bruce Wayne doesn't push carts, like it doesn't happen.
This guy might.
And then obviously like reading Black Casebook and everything, and seeing all the imagery of that, especially Batradia, because that kind of got seared in my head. And then also the Rainbow Godzilla and all of that. So it was kind of really interesting and entertaining. I did thought that the first person was Jason Todd, not necessarily Tim Drake, because Jason Todd kind of has the
motorcycles
and everything. So Yeah, like
That's
it's so I thought that they were also trying to reel him in, but then they never got to him, but then again there was like, so that's what I was kind of thinking about it, because he looks like, that's why he doesn't look like Tim Drake. He looks like
they
Jason Todd.
all look
So
similar,
someone in
which
the
Yeah,
is the
they're
comments,
all,
issue.
please
Batman's
correct
got a
me, let
type.
me know.
He's got a
Yeah, standard issue white guys.
Yeah.
So y'all kind of
Floppy
look the
Tom
same to
Cruise
me.
hair, blue
Like,
eyes. Yeah, perfect nose. He's got, okay. So,
yeah.
I- wow. Okay. So at the beginning, Tim Drake is reading some iteration of the casebook, some journal of Batman that's from 5 years into him being Batman. And it has this really interesting quote in it, which you can read in the present tense, but also the 5 years ago, which is, after this last year, the boundaries between what's real and what's illusion have come to seem as threadbare as a moldering
Mhm.
shroud. How do I learn to think like these monsters I've chosen to fight and not let my own mind be mangled out of all recognition in the process? It's the key to what's happening with Batman. It explains the disassociation, explains the obsession, kink, if you will, with dying,
Yeah.
because he's got to find a way to get into the heads of these killers, keep his Batman pure, keep his Bruce Wayne separate. And this moment, I mean, there's this great panel where Tim Drake is like eating popcorn, like he's having a show as he's experiencing
Yeah.
the casebook in the story, exactly as
So
we experience the casebook, but then also with like author's commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that popcorn, it's Jason Todd. He's the one who would
It's
actually eat popcorn like that.
they're
No, but
potato
it's Tim.
chips.
It's clearly
It's
Tim
Tim
Drake.
Drake.
because
They're the two in it.
he like gets his act together by the end of this. But I also think it reminds me a little bit of The Never-Ending Story, one of my favorite movies, where the kid is kind of like in the attic and he's reading the page of the book and he looks up from the book and he's like, but it's not real. Like Tim Drake maybe hasn't been exposed to some as much of this wacky stuff, and he's like totally absorbed by it, trying to understand how Bruce feels about it. So just that one page, I feel like I could just go over and over and over. But
Yeah.
the whole, I come and go on the whole imaginary friend is really dead or not there thing that Fariha likes. Sometimes it really works for me.
Here.
Great episode of My So-Called Life with Juliana Hatfield, I think, is a snow angel. But sometimes it doesn't work for me. And I think it works for me here because Bruce Wayne's trying to like reintegrate. What is he right now? He's like partially has amnesia. He doesn't really know that he's Batman. He doesn't know that he's Bruce Wayne. So it kind of makes sense to me that he would have left himself almost the ability to have a mental guidepost. I mean, that's very much a meditation tactic or technique that you almost need something that's external to you to like give you the mantra or lead you without letting your own mind become too active in the thought, because then you won't be meditating anymore. So you almost like have to like receive it, right? And that's like, and then you like repeat the mantra, and that's what's happening here. And Grant Morrison knows this, and so he's really kind of like having Bruce Wayne be led to the point where he can access this Zornar thing. It's being used against him in some ways by Dr. Hurt, who knows it's there, but he's almost like weaponized it back in return. And that's what Dr. Hurt thinks he got one over on Bruce, but not really, because Bruce he's always prepared. He's the pinnacle of human achievement and perfection. He has a counter tactic to the counter tactic to the counter tactic.
So I understand your overall complaint that like an overly prepared Batman is like boring for like dramatic stakes, but in a book like this, it is so fun because the way his preparation takes is absolutely crazy, because he like finds a bunch of rags and crazy fabrics and knits himself a new costume as the Batman.
The needle and thread. I mean, how many times in a superhero story have you literally seen the inset panel of the hero threading that stuff's not easy. Have you done a lot of sewing by hand? It is hard to thread a needle.
No.
I have.
That panel just made my life. Batman threading a needle. I'm like, this makes me actually enjoy Bruce Wayne.
And the Batman of Zurn, again, just bouncing back to the Black Casebook, seeing where this entire plot line came from and realizing that he used his like hallucination or actual trip to that planet, we'll get into that later, as like a way to like weaponize his personality, become this predator version of himself as like a fail safe when he's under a hardcore like mental attack. These are great sentences. Comics are great. Like, this rules. That's kind of my major point about this.
But to be honest, like I was talking about yesterday, that why I don't necessarily like DC characters, when they are like idiots. But
Yeah.
this is why I love DC characters, because of things like this, like because of his over preparation and stuff like that. I would have been absolutely trashing this if he was not prepared and if he didn't know this, because that's what I am expected to see in these characters. I don't want failures from them. I don't want failures from Batman. I don't want failures from Wonder Woman. I don't want failures from Superman. For that, I'll go to Daredevil. Like, I have other options for that.
Yeah, Daredevil. If you want to see somebody who fails at everything they do, we'll read a Daredevil.
Perpetual loser for
decades of comics. Cyclops, these are the losers.
Exactly. I'll read Spider-Man. Like, I'll go read those. But the thing is, like, when the characters are supposed to be larger than life, they have to be larger than life. And larger than life doesn't mean that what me, the rando, will do in real life. Larger than life means that they're going to be so prepared that they have a separate personality hidden, which will be triggered if the bad guys try to trigger and erase their memory. Wow. Like, chef's kiss. Like, 100%. This is why DC Comics is actually great when can be.
Yeah, and I love that it's not just like, I already said it, it's not just like a backup personality. It's a backup personality wearing the craziest colors you've ever seen, hanging out with an imp from the fifth dimension. Like, I love Grant Morrison.
Well, as we continue our read of Batman R.I.P. into Batman 679, I think we still have to continue talking about that last page of 678, which is Technicolor Batman and the Bat-Imp, because this issue has a quote in it: "A checkerboard, a blueprint, a machine designed to make Batman." And as we see him sewing this costume at the end of 678, he also has this checkerboard cloth that he's cradling his little transistor radio in.
That's black and red.
It's black and red. But then there's this idea that this costume that he sews, it's got black and red, but then it's got purple and yellow. And we get into a little bit of his whole, like, it works for Robin, which I forget if that happens in this issue or a little bit later on. Yeah, it's a little bit later on. But it's this idea that this Zur-En-Arrh Batman is kind of like out of the, usually we would say black and white dichotomy, but he's outside of this black and red dichotomy. He's not Batman Bruce Wayne. He's not Batman Joker. He's not good bad. This idea of the checkerboard where a checker can only advance, to ones of its own color, or a chessboard where the pieces are restricted. Zur-En-Arrh is being... Zur-En-Arrh Batman is being deliberately positioned as a character who is immune to the withholding aspect of a dichotomy of the game board.
Yeah, and I love that scene where he is seeing the actual grids and compares it to a blueprint and a design, a machine to make Batman, because what you're looking at is a personality construct being able to perceive the other constructs and machinations that create something like him pulled back. It's just this incredible, it's just like such a odd, different perspective, like that you would ever see. And also on a much more basic level, I love that he has a baseball bat. That is so fun. He's just beating up criminals.
With a bat,
like he
talking
is
to gargoyles.
Unhinged.
I mean, we've gone full. I mean, it's deep, but it is also fully ridiculous.
He's just it's so deep, but there's colorful and it's just bonkers. And Batmite's here, like out of nowhere. When was the last time Batmite showed up in a comic? I'm serious. Like, was it since the Golden Age Black Casebook issues that we read?
Fariha, what do you think about this 679, which is kind of like Zur-En-Arrh going on the prowl here?
Yeah,
Zur-En-Arrh unleashed.
No, I mean, I kind of loved that. That the discussion with the gargoyles, like, it's like, were they real? Were they real? Like, he was asking the Batmite, is like, even though he knows that the Batmite isn't real, but then he was asking the non-real thing. Like, I mean, it's like, are they talking to me? And it's like, you? I just kind of kept a look at the Batmite consistently have that like monster thing on top of him that is just consistently there. Like, it just, and that like kind of always creeped me out. And then also like talking about like the grids, the city and grids and all of that. There was a lot. And then this, like, I want to see a whole series of this Batman, this version of Batman.
I do too.
He doesn't seem
there's
about anything.
No.
Anything.
There's there's a Batman video game where they have DLC costumes, and eventually they got the Zur-Anar costume, and I was just like, this is all I'm playing as for the rest of this game. I am only playing as the Zur-Anar Batman because it's such a bizarre costume.
There is a Zarnar Batman Funko as well. In case
I gotta go spend money.
There's a Funko Pop
Yeah.
of that.
BRB.
Yes, because and then the thing is, like, even after he fought with these people, and then there was like a teeth, like, it's like, oh, I hope they didn't put it in the tooth, and then he had to take the tooth out, and along with it the tracker. He later comes back to the theater with his cart. His cart is there again, and then he has all the costume in it. I thought that was really nice.
I love it.
That was like, and he never, like, that was fun. And then also there are other Batmans are also kind of called in, like, Robin calls them in.
The Club of Heroes.
Like, hey,
I think
the Club of Heroes and all that. So that's kind of nice.
I don't think that's this issue, but we'll get to that.
No, it is this issue.
I think it ends on that moment.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I retract my statement. I'm so sorry.
No, maybe not. Maybe not. No, it doesn't quite. I think it's the next one. So
yes, I'm just flipping through it.
So I think you guys have hit a lot of it. I do really love the whole, I mean, Harry just really, the whole ridiculousness of the grid overlaid on the city is pointed out by the gargoyle. I mean, it's just great. I did take a quick peek, and Batmite had been used sparingly, like once or twice a decade since the 80s. So it's not like a infinitely recurring character.
Okay.
Tim does call in the reinforcements here, but this is where we get this Black Glove Thomas Wayne revelation, and Alfred immediately is like, I don't think so, which is Morrison really plays here with the effectiveness as Alfred, not only as a father figure, but as somebody who has a very specific set of skills that he's instilled in Batman. There's a great line later on, that it's Alfred's acting that gets credited for this. And we're playing with this whole idea of artifice, right? That the Black Glove is the ultimate artifice. He's trying to pass off this whole shell game to Commissioner Gordon and the mayor that, like, Thomas Wayne was actually, this awful drug addict, and that Martha Wayne was an abuse victim and everything. And Alfred is like, I can see through all of that, because when you're a master of artifice is transparent to you. And that's something that he's also instilled in Batman, which then comes back to the whole idea of, like, the grids on the city that Batman can kind of just see through. So there's a big stack of really interesting themes all on top of each other here.
Yeah, no,
I also like that at the end that Joker says that oh no, he's too early, my nails are not dry yet.
Yeah, I love that scene so much. What I love about the Simon Hurt stuff is, like, he's probably not Bruce Wayne's dad.
Probably.
He's not this. But
Probably not.
Probably. There are multiple identities with Simon Hurt, and this arc never fully commits to any and leaves you in that confused, like, unsure state. And this whole arc has got so many, like, themes, just moments of just, like, reality versus unreality, and them kind of mixing in with each other, and what's real and what's not. And maybe it's all real if you listen to Batmite at the end. But, like, it's this level of uncertainty that is such a present theme and feeling in this book, and I just think it's the strongest with Dr. Hurt.
I didn't quite like the idea of, like, I am Thomas Wayne, by the way. Like, that just felt like, I'm like, we know you're not. So, I mean, I wish there was, like, more, like, I did appreciate that, Alfred is like, yeah, nah, like, but the thing is, like, there was, like, this whole, they were trying to, that there was the Gazette thing where it's like, yeah, I mean, look at this picture and everything. I'm like, ew, gross. Like, nah.
It's horrifying. It's disgusting. I find it compelling, like, this absurd figure who's dressing up in Thomas Wayne's clothes and claiming to be him, and, like, dipping champagne on Alfred. There's just, like, this perverse depravity that this character has that might come up much later in the run, but we'll talk about that in a few episodes. So.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead necessarily, but I did read Batman 682 and 683 this week, because Harry and I will have this out in the next episode. I think they're better to read here. Harry thinks they're better to read with Final Crisis. Harry won because he's the captain of the ship, but I have opinions.
Well, we'll get to it later. You might have been more right than you think, but still, like, plot-wise, like in reality, that takes place later. Yes, whatever.
But my point, without spoiling, is I think everybody in the room, including the reader, knows that Black Glove is not Thomas Wayne, but he's got to represent an aspect of Thomas Wayne and what Thomas Wayne could have been, and the successes and failures inherent in that, in order to act as the symbol he needs to act in here, both within Arkham, to Batman, all of that. And that you really kind of get what it would mean for him to be Thomas Wayne when you read 682 and 683. Right now, you kind of just like roll your eyes, at least I do, at it a little bit. And then when you read those 2 issues, you're like, okay, he's symbolizing something. It's part of the puppetry that the ventriloquism that he's doing to try to deepen Batman's psychosis. So like, I'm personally happy I read those issues. It's allowing me to get much deeper into the fun of this instead of like being like, I have questions, I have complaints. Because I think that 682 and 683 kind of was the balm for me there. It settled me down a little bit.
That's how I remember it when it was coming out.
I'm okay with that, but the thing is, like, I'm just kind of always a little like, ugh, it always come at the expense of the woman. Like, you know, it came at the expense of like, oh, Martha Wayne was abused, or Martha Wayne.
Yeah, why couldn't like, especially be Martha Wayne? Why is it always always got to be Thomas Wayne?
I know.
Like, well, that to me, that I find that to be like, ugh, because it's like they kind of tried to. Like thankfully they didn't show the picture, because then I would be like, horrible. I'm done with this. But then the way they kind of described the picture, and then it came at the expense of Martha Wayne. And it always happens. Like anytime there's someone trying to be like, oh, Thomas Wayne and stuff like that, it comes at the expense of Martha Wayne. I am just done with that.
But don't you think it's Morrison making a comment on that? Like it's because we don't get to see the picture.
Everyone always makes a comment.
Yeah, but that. I know, but no. Like, hold on. I want to get into this.
I want to say something too. So yeah.
Look, so a lot of people are like, oh, I'm making a commentary about the vulnerability of women with this terrible plot about vulnerable women. But I want to look for a second about how Morrison actually executes that. And I've totally lost track of what issue this scene is actually in now, but whatever. We're talking about it now.
Second one.
So he never actually shows it. Commissioner Gordon is totally skeptical. If this had been 5 or 10 years later, I feel like it almost could have been a commentary about the idea of deepfakes and how like deepfakes are actually being weaponized against the person who's the most vulnerable, even though they can be used on anybody. Like, why not use the deep fake to make somebody else look like an addict? No, let's use it against the woman, right? Like, why use the deep fake to like make it look like this woman, you know, was naked and vulnerable instead of a man? Oh, because she's a woman, and that's how we're going to choose to use it. And I feel like by Morrison and Daniels too, framing the scene the way that they do together and never letting us see it and playing it out on the skepticism of Commissioner Gordon, almost is kind of like Gordon being like, I see through this bullshit. You can't just be like, oh, look, I magically discovered the woman was a victim, and this story makes sense because women are always victim, and I'm just gonna friggin' buy it.
Sure. Fariha, I just want to, Peter, I like your defense of that. I still think I'm gonna side with Fariha a bit on this, but Fariha, I want to say there is more happening here that we will get into later. This is not the end of this whole thing. I don't know if that will absolve the basic idea, but there is more happening that we will visit later.
No, and that's completely fine. There's always something more happen. There's always like, oh, it was the time. There's always like, oh, this is the commentary. I'm just like, at one point, I want to read through one story with like a male superhero where the women is no women has been harmed during the making of this male superhero. I want to get to that. Like, I want to get to that point. I know, right? I don't know. Yeah. Like, I know, right? Like it just doesn't happen. Even like, you know, with the previous one we have seen, there was like 3 women who were like even used as a cannon fodder, but then they were like constantly abused, beaten, and then it was like they didn't have any, like, I don't know. Yeah, it just like, you know, the whole thing. I was like, okay, sure.
Fair enough.
Sure.
Well, sure. You know, Batman puts into words the
and
thing
even Jezebel Jet, who is
we'll get to that.
We're getting there. We're about to get there.
Like, you know, yeah, it's supposed. No, I know. But the thing is, like, okay, I'll save it for that.
Well, let's go. So Batman at the end of 679 says, "See, I'm Batman of Zern-R. I'm what you get when you take Bruce Wayne out of the equation," making the theme plainly stated. And then we move into 680, which everything comes together in Arkham. But Harry's got things, Free's got things. I don't need to go next. Just talk. So Harry, what do you have?
Batman launches his assault on Arkham Asylum, and he kind of stops at the doorway, and it kind of like really addresses all of these themes that Batman is, bringing up in this work, where Batman's basically saying, I cannot go in any further. This, I'm the last fading echo of the last voice of reason. And Batman asks, are you really an alien hyper imp from the fifth dimension or just a figment of my imagination? And he just says, imagination is the fifth dimension. No duh, that kind of thing. And I actually think that's kind of, proven in the text, because in the last issue at the very end, when he's beating up whatever his name was, Charlie Caligula or whatever he was called, at the very end, right before he starts getting beat on, Charlie sees something behind Batman, basically saying this imagination figment actually became manifest in that moment. And I just think it's like such a nice summation, this arc of just showing things being real and not real and meshing and mixing and kind of coming apart and not being certain about what's totally happening, both to the characters and the reader. But the final reveal here is that basically Jezebel Jet has been a sleeper agent and has been luring Batman into this kind of state of security to destroy this aspect of him. And I'm going to be honest, I think this is probably the weakest part of this book in the run. I just don't think she's ever believable. I think she's always pretty obviously some kind of double agent. And, later on, Batman says, I was faking having feelings for you the entire time. And it just seems a little muddled and kind of formulaic in a way, kind of bring up what Fariha was saying. So not to end on a downer note there, but yeah, this is definitely, I think, one of the less strong. Also, there is the weird optics of she's part of the black and red and black pattern because she's literally black with red hair. I don't know how to feel about that either. But
all right, Fariha,
right?
Get into it.
No, I mean so the thing is when she says that, that this was the one thing that really got to me is there was another thing. Oh, you were abused as a child, so therefore you became and then they also did the whole thing of not telling you what the abuse is, but we all know what it was, right?
Sure.
So it was just one of those things. I was like, okay, really, seriously, no ladies can just aspire to be a villain. I'm an aspiring villain. Lady
You
villain.
are.
Yeah,
you'd be good.
I am. And I have nothing, I have no trauma in my life, other than just general family stuff. But I'm an aspiring lady villain. So the thing is, why can't these ladies be? Why can't there has to be some other, oh, your mom was taken away and she was potentially who knows what happened to her. And then there's all of that. And then it's I was acting. So the thing is, because I already knew this reveal. So if you look at all previous, all the previous issues of him together, he was actually genuinely acting well. You can see through that. To me, I felt because I was buying it because I knew that. So I was looking for that. So when I went back and looked through it, he did a very good job in terms of acting through it all, but the thing is she was never convincing, because we as a reader know she cannot be it will forever be Selena Kyle. So that's how we know. Yeah, that's how we know she's never it. No, girl, pack your bag, get out of here.
It's Selena.
Yeah. So it's kind of matter of because the story that we already know as a reader outside.
I feel like this is another example of Morrison trying to do a is this real, is this not real, what's actually happening, but I just don't fully think it's expressed that well in the story. I never was really sure if Bruce was actually in love or not, but I don't even know if I care, because I don't think it was really that compelling a part of this. It's thematically consistent. I just don't think it's done that well. I don't know, Peter, what did you think?
But isn't it isn't it because that that Bruce Wayne cannot just be in love with anyone?
I think that's my bigger issue. Happen. I think this plot's always been a little weak through the entire omnibus, and I think for the amount of time Morrison put into it for the return, I thought it's kind of because it's just I don't think, it's kind of hard to sell a love interest with Batman, kind of inherently. I think that the closest anyone's ever got is Tom King, because he put a lot of work into it. And I just didn't really feel that here. But that's very specific and personal for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that I just went so vociferously in my defense of that Martha Wayne moment, because I actually feel like that's an interesting story beat, because it's about the artifice. I don't think we're ever really supposed to believe it, which is what to me makes it interesting and almost allowable to put somebody in a victim position when the whole thing is clearly fictionalized and the whole point is being able to like untie the fiction, as opposed to the Jezebel Jet stuff, which is garbage.
There it is.
Why is Morrison obsessed with using every woman in this run as a prop? Like, you can write good Batman without making women all just accessories. The boys all get to be fully realized characters, but even Talia teeters on the edge of just being a prop that whatever, you know, issue requires her to be, she will be. And I think it is as high as I was on the last two issues, I really get low during 680 and 681. Honestly, I don't want to talk about any of the other Jezebel stuff because I think it's garbage. The thing I want to talk about is the Joker.
Yeah.
So Le Bossu at the beginning, who's the hunchback, claims that all of Black Glove's menagerie of international Batman villains are inspired in their own ways by Joker, which makes sense because Joker is Batman's signature villain. All of the international Batman needed a signature villain. But he says these two really fascinating things. First, he says your flamboyance, your dedication to your art. And again, flamboyance, for better or for worse, is definitely something that is, encoded with some queer coded aspects to it, which goes to the way that Joker is being visually gender bent here. And you can't help but see that. But the other thing he says is, my friends and I were just talking about how extraordinarily inevitable you are. Does that sound familiar? Did we talk about someone else being inevitable last episode?
All of them are.
All of them are, but Ra's al Ghul is described as inevitable as well. Yeah. So it's kind of like
fixtures.
Right. And so then we get into this idea of what do they represent, right? Because is it that they are personally as characters inevitable, or is it that the force that they represent and embody in the world is an inevitable force, and by embodying that force, they're an inevitable version of something that Batman will have to face. So, previously when we were talking about Ra's al Ghul being inevitable, it's because he's like eternal. He's always coming at you. It was much more about the character being inevitable. But I read that comment about Joker as about chaos being inevitable. The breakdown of things being inevitable, and entropy being inevitable. And that the Joker is just a conduit of that inevitability, but maybe these kind of second tier villains, these imitations, they don't get that. So they think Joker himself is inevitable, but Joker would be the first one to tell you he's not inevitable. Chaos is inevitable.
Yeah.
And I just think that was, and especially, Joker later in that same issue to Batman, you think it all breaks down into symbolism and structures and hints and clues. No, Batman, that's just Wikipedia. Which is like, again, you can't just explain Joker. You can't be like, well, Joker got abused, so he's Joker. Joker's wife died because he's Joker. He's Joker because entropy is inevitable.
And what's a nice balancing act Morrison does is that they're positioning this Joker as this otherworldly eternal structure of just chaos, and it will reform and reshape. But at the same time, they humanize him in a sense, because Joker's role in this story is to get offended at the Black Glove for using them, but also getting offended at Batman for trying to be like him and aim his plans and his structures at the Joker. Both of them, he's just saying, you can't understand this. It is insulting to me that you would try, and it was insulting to the Black Glove that you would rope me into this kind of feeble thing. It's like a really interesting thing, while still being, it's just such a much more extrapolated kind of esoteric thing of saying Joker doesn't like plans.
Well, and Joker also saying don't try to put me into this red and black. I am not one of those cards. Don't try to side me against somebody. I'm only he's pure chaos. People would say that he's evil chaos, but chaos without a good or an evil is actually more terrifying than chaotic evil, because you don't know which way it's going to go.
It's just such and just his offense and his insultedness that Batman would try to get to think like him through these rote experiments, and B, that he shot him in the head is
Batman's I clearly didn't shoot you in the head. He's really upset. He's like, it wasn't me, Joker. Joker's so tacky to shoot me in the head. And
I love this intimacy. I love that he's I didn't shoot you, just so we're clear. There's a weird intimacy they still have.
Yes.
I think the Joker in this is excellent. And I just think, he cuts his, just the visceral grossness of saying all of this and all this high-minded stuff while cutting his tongue in half. Like there's so much stuff happening and such.
Well,
It's
I
so
mean,
great.
we could go down like a whole rabbit hole here about him cutting his tongue in half and the forked tongue
Mhm.
being a sign of the serpent or the devil,
Yeah.
and the snake offering knowledge. But like to offer knowledge, which he's literally talking about here with the Wikipedia page, is in itself, a chaotic offer because it's unleashing, your ability to kind of like fractally just spiral out and become anything once you have knowledge. Knowledge is
Mhm.
dangerous. I mean, this is all there, and Morrison is that good. And yes, they absolutely meant for us to have all of these things to be read into this Joker stuff.
And no offense to, well, maybe some offense to Scott Snyder, but
No,
it is
all
truly
offense to Scott. Full offense to Scott Snyder.
It's truly incredible how much more Morrison gets out of like their few issues writing Joker compared to Snyder, who like writes like 2.5 arcs about the Joker, and it's just like this is still just so singular and special. What did you think, Freya?
No, I think like Joker is me. Like, like there is like every arc, there is like a one Fariha character that is like channeling their inner Fariha. And in this arc, it goes to Joker because like you can be better. You can like, what are you doing? This is beneath you. Like, there's that aspect of it. And he's also upset that he got roped into it just because it's like
I
a
love
Batman.
that.
Like just because Batman is into it, so then you get to be into it. But I mean, it's also like the whole point that he's the agent of chaos and everything. I think there was somewhere that he says that I only exist because Batman exists.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to exist without that. Like and it just like he needs to be the yin and yang, and which is something that he says here too. So yeah, I think like it all comes down to that, and there's also one other things I said before. Rogue Gallery, if you're trying to take down Batman, just do it on your own.
Do it on your own.
Don't
Don't
bring
bring
Joker.
And why are you even going into Arkham Asylum, right? Everybody's like, we're going to trap Batman in Arkham. I'm like, clearly it's not that secure of a building to begin with. And B, there's all sorts of people in there with their own agendas that are going to mess up your plan.
I want to quickly just give a bit of like,
why is like Arkham Asylum a thing?
I don't know.
Like
it's not real.
It should be taken out. It should be taken out.
I want to quickly,
It just like the X Mansion is like that, like one thing that just like constantly, like, why are you always there?
Well, they took care of that.
Done. Yeah, they took care of that. So I want this to be taken care of.
I mean, we're going to turn over to Harry in a minute, I promise. But as a Batman hater, certified Batman hater, I have come to the decision that Arkham Asylum is never real. It is only a metaphor. It's the Batman Rogues Gallery version of the inside of Legion's head. It just represents all of the crazy possibilities of Gotham, and you only have to read it as a physical, tangible place insofar as it serves a particular scene where people are walking down a hallway, and otherwise it does you no credit to think of it as a tangible place. That's my take on Arkham.
And I just want to give a little bit of quick love
to. I'm glad that you said that, but let someone please take that and make that canon. We have given you the right. Like, just do it. Like, just do it. Make it canon so that we are all in the same page on that. Let's not make it a thing anymore.
Except for Scott Snyder, he can't use it. Anybody else, totally fair game. Okay, Harry.
Whoever.
Oh, I'm done.
Well, look, we've kind of already rolled into this, but we get into Batman 681. See, we got this kind of push and pull of the kind of like garbage Jezebel plot happening that we've all kind of rolled our eyes at. Joker kind of just excusing himself from the game board, and then Black Glove having his, typical megalomaniac turn, which honestly just kind of feels like a repeat of the end of the first Black Glove plot. Like, oh, we're on a helicopter again, we're crashing again. Like, I mean, and there's thematic reasons to do that, but here's the thing I want to focus on. I want to give you 3 Batman quotes, and then you all can talk about whatever you want to end our episode.
Sure.
Batman says these 3 things. First, he says, in Thogel, the initiate learns what the dead know. The self is peeled back to its black, radiant core. Really speaking to the idea of, is Zaranarth the middle of Batman? Is Bruce Wayne is the middle of Batman? Is love in the middle of Batman? What's the core, right? And it doesn't necessarily want to answer that question. The second quote is, I wanted to taste the flavor of death. I wanted to know that I had finally experienced every eventuality. Because the issue opens with the whole idea of Batman thinks of everything. And in order to think of everything, he needs to understand death. He's so committed to having death not be the thing that he's going to assess on any of his villains, but he needs to understand it before he can even make that claim. And then finally, which I alluded to earlier, love congratulate Alfred on the acting lessons.
Yeah.
Which really makes you, in a way, doubt the sincerity of anything that Batman ever does. Which is a wonderful plot out. It's a wonderful cat door out the back of plot whenever you don't want us to believe his sincerity in anything. But I think, Fariha already beautifully stated, like, to what extent can we believe in anything in this whole Jezebel Jet Batman cat and mouse game? Or maybe they did both genuinely believe the other one was falling in love with them while they were genuinely, fakingly falling in love with the other one. I don't know. So Harry, Fariha, take us home. Harry, what do we need to take away from the end of this? Which, by the way, it gives every appearance that Batman dies, I think, in the final page.
Yeah,
but he's not dead quite yet.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know what, all opinions are subjective and are teach them. I know what you're talking about, that you didn't like this issue. I think this issue absolutely rules because it is just a series of really great moments. I'm not made of stone. I like a badass Batman moment. Him talking about how what it takes to break out of a coffin and dig himself out of a grave.
That was cool. That's
just cool. It's very cool. I think the Joker has.
Buffy Summers did it much more easily. This is much less complaining than Batman. I'm just gonna put that.
Yeah, that's true. Batman seems like kind of sometimes a whiner, but the Joker has great moments here where he just takes out one of the fingers of the Black Glove and just kind of shows how offended he is. And there's just a line I love here that just, the wild card, devil is double as deuce, my dear doctor, and Joker trumps deuce. And it just shows like how, just for all of like Simon Hurt's attempts at like breaking Batman, for all of this, it does come off kind of small and petty and not able to stop like these two eternal forces, which is Batman and Joker.
Would you call them inevitable?
Lesser. I guess I would call it. And then finally, you've got
implacable. Are they more inevitable or more implacable?
It's shock. But the scene here that like stays in my mind like always is just Batman facing down Dr. Hurt at the helicopter, which is just such like, this is kind of the moment where this series shifts, where so far the series has been dealing with identity, and as we're getting into Batman R.I.P.'s reality and what's real and what's not, and this is where they're starting to hint more at what even is Simon Hurt and where does this person come from? And Batman has an idea, like, you must be Mangrove Pierce, star of the Black Glove. You must have had an affair with John Hughes' wife, and he framed you for murder. And he's like, no, I skinned Mangrove Pierce alive. And you're not even sure, like, at least when I read the first time, I think it's the intent of the book, like, you're not entirely sure what's even happening. They're not really confirming like one answer or the other. But the most important thing here is where the book transitions from these other themes to this more heightened idea of like manifested ideas and different kind of like concepts becoming real and affecting reality. Because what basically Dr. Hurt says is, I curse the cape and cowl, as you will soon. The next time you wear it, it will be the last. Now you could read that as just a person's supervillain monologue as he's going down, but you can also read it as a curse. And I think that is my preferred interpretation of that scene as we get into Final Crisis and the second act of this series. So this is around, like, this scene just has stayed in my brain for years and years and years. And I think it's pretty integral to what's coming up in this series.
All right. Fariha?
I kind of liked the idea of that, him being the actor who had the affair, and then that I, even though it kind of came out of like, okay, just coming out of nowhere, but at the same time it kind of tracks if you're reading the whole run up to this point.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It's like, okay, this is like all happening and everything, but at the same time I was like, okay, why? Like,
Fariha, can I add, do you know what his ultimate identity is?
I don't, so no spoilers.
I'm not saying anything. Okay, I'm really excited for what's coming, and I hope some of the readers are excited too, because it is my favorite part of this run, is what's going on with Dr. Hurt.
No, I mean, I was just saying that it's just, I really liked, I feel like that there was like the one, like, 2/3 of it I liked, and then 1/3 I was like, okay, that just, there was a lot of good, cool build up, a lot of thematic build up and everything, but then at the end it just happens. And I feel
Sure.
like it was just kind of done because we needed to put the plot forward for the next one. I'm pretty sure like when I read everything else and come back to it, it will read differently. So I'm waiting for that. I really liked the idea of the image of like Nightwing picking up the Batman cowl. It was
Yes.
very symbolic. There was a lot of things going on, and he was just looking at it as like a very heavy burden responsibility. So that's very good.
A Morrison purist might say that that page totally negates the need for that entire Batman Battle for the Cowl series. But we're going to do it anyway because I'm curious. I've never read it either.
Yeah, a lot of this is just curiosity. A lot of it is driving this read. Like, why not read the Resurrection of Ra's al Ghul? Why not read Battle for the Cowl?
Are we reading Batman Fight for the Cowl?
Yeah.
Well, fellas, you can do that episode on your own because...
Why not?
Free's not going back there.
I ain't going back to that.
Maybe we'll have a special guest star. You can nominate a special guest star.
It's like,
I mean, I've read parts of it. I don't disagree. We haven't even talked about the final part of this, the final 2 pages of this book, which are like the most important. First of all, it's a 6 months later, and you have I can't pronounce it, but the Hunchback of Notre Dame inspired villain, Basu. Peter, please help.
You can call him Quasimodo.
Quasimodo is about to torture people, and even Batman and Robin are dead, and you have this flash of yellow light, and then you just see the smiling kidnap victim, and then the very final page, which I think is a brilliant page, which is just kind of showing where all of this came from, which is Bruce Wayne leaving the theater, Mask of Zorro, with his parents and talking about how heroic and exciting Zorro is, and his dad says the sad thing is they'd probably throw someone like Zorro in Arkham. And that kind of shows where Zur-En-Arrh came from. Just this idea that like, my read is if Thomas Wayne was alive, he would think that someone like Batman should be in the asylum, which is, I would assume, could help break someone down pretty well. But yeah, that's my read anyway.
Well, let me offer a wonderful tag onto that, which is my favorite 3 panels from this issue. It's on the page where Joker bids farewell. And he says, so the whole black and red thing, I got that from the tiles on my cell floor. Or maybe it was the crowbar I beat Robin's brains out with. It's simple, it preys on the mind, the ultimate gag. Now you here, now you ain't. Get it? But it doesn't matter, see? Because every time I try to think outside his toy box, he builds a new box around me. Apophenia. Does anybody here know what apophenia means?
I don't, but I'm ready to find out.
Apophenia is the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. The term was coined by psychiatrist Claus Conrad in 1958 publication on the beginning stages of schizophrenia. Morrison loves to tell us what's actually happening in the words of the character. Joker's telling us explicitly, all of these patterns mean nothing. The black and red, Joker as inevitable chaos, the black glove as Thomas Wayne. Anything you think is significant is purely in the eye of the beholder. It's apophenia. It's where we started in DC Universe 0. It's why you have to go back and reread it now that we finished R.I.P. The whole message is none of it has meaning. Batman's given it meaning so that he can have structure for himself, but even that structure has no meaning. So to try to build meaning around defeating Batman by understanding Batman is an impossible task. And that's what makes Joker the best Batman villain. It's what makes it so he'll always lose to Batman, but it also is what makes Black Glove so compelling, because Black Glove is trying to fight Batman at this level of like, I will make up ridiculous symbology as ridiculous as yours, because actually there's no meaning. The only meaning is the effect that it has on the eyes of the beholder. And that is my thesis statement that I began an hour ago and that I will conclude with here.
I completely agree. I think it's such an eloquent, like fun, expression of the Joker and his ideology. And it's definitely one of my favorites. I think Morrison really tapped into something special when they wrote this.
I agree with, like, if you're talking about it from Joker point of view, that Joker saying all of that, but I don't necessarily agree with it from the point, like, if Morrison is telling that to the readers that this is how you should be reading. I don't think he.
No.
I don't think they are, because I think like this is a perfect Joker concept, but the fact that nothing means anything is like, okay, no, come on now. No.
Well, I mean,
sounds-
that's purely nihilist, but I do think that they are making a little bit of a point of like, you can try to read a lot of stuff into this run. I'm certainly giving you everything from a forked devil's tongue to Black and Red to Zora or whatever, but at a point, you're descending into insanity, trying to find meaning in what ultimately is a golden age comic book about gay pride Godzilla.
But Morrison, I think, still likes a lot of these structures and patterns and what have you. I just think when they're writing Joker, they've got to take that position. I think they're both there at the same time, which is to say, you can take as much as you want out of something, or you can take none of it.
Well, it's also kind of a comment on
to
people.
Be honest,
go ahead, Fariha.
No, I was just gonna say some of the X-Men writers could actually learn from that. To be honest,
I also see it as like a little bit of a message of like, you can be a formalist writer, but like stop reading so much into the formalism. It's just I don't know. Maybe I'm reading a little bit too much of Morrison's voice into Joker here, but I do think that Morrison likes to reveal their cards quite literally using Joker, and I just think that it's a warning of like, have all the fan theories you want to, but at a point it's a story.
I agree.
Yeah.
So you fell into the trap that he's telling you to avoid.
Oh yes, I went through a whole ass journey, y'all. He showed me the card at the beginning. I literally said what the conclusion would be. Then I went through this whole friggin' journey, only at the end to be like, right, nothing matters, and the Joker is wild.
I think this is absolutely on their mind, but like, I don't think ultimately he's going to probably take the nihilist perspective. I just think they're saying like, keep this in perspective while you're reading.
Right,
this,
that's it. You have to separate the ability to interpret Epiphania as nihilist from the point of it here.
Yeah,
but
I love this run. I love this issue.
I am going to say that, that's like my viewpoint is that just Joker messing, and let Joker say his nonsense, and we just carry on. Like, the story has to mean something. Story has to mean something. The story has to have an effect on people, like on the character, on you as a reader. If it's like, I hate the idea of to say, it's just comics. No, it's not.
Well,
Morrison's not a Rick and Morty guy. Like, I'm sure that they want like meaning in their work and in comics. It's just,
here's something that we're starting to miss here. Again, I'll read the definition because I'm missing it too. The finger is pointed back at me. The tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. Morrison definitely has related things in this arc. It's about seeing patterns where it's perceiving patterns where there's not patterns. It's not saying there's no patterns. And maybe I've gone a little bit too far in my back patting and talking about it over the last 5 or 10 minutes. But there you go. So next episode, Batman.
Oh boy.
So here's the thing. let me just level with you, listeners. So we're going to read Batman 682 and 683, which are part of Last Rites, and they're written by Morrison. Last Rites continued, but not by Morrison, so it's not in the omnibuses, so we're not reading it. We're going to read Final Crisis 1 through 7. We're going to read Superman Beyond 3D 1 and 2. And we're going to read Final Crisis Submit. That's the plan anyway.
That's it.
But I'm not saying that that's the order we're going to talk about them in the episode. I'm not saying we're going to read other Final Crisis stuff as we go down the rabbit hole. I might just walk off the set because I hate Final Crisis so much. I'm just saying, expect the unexpected. And if you're trying to do the homework, you are going to have to depart from the omnibuses briefly because you've got to read at minimum Final Crisis 1 through 7. Even though the Batman stuff really is only in 6 and 7, we're reading it all, god damn it. And also, we are going to read these 3 other issues, Superman Beyond 3D 1 and 2, and Final Crisis Submit.
I will own up to this. This is all my idea. I think to fully understand, my personal opinion, and you might disagree, leave a comment if you do. I believe to fully appreciate this run, you need to read Final Crisis, which I think is inextricably tied with the second act, the second omnibus of this series. And we're going to read Final Crisis Beyond because that's how you make sense of Final Crisis. So just what it is. I like those comics. The conversation might get messy. It's a messy book. It'd be very apropos. So we're going to find out. And I've said a lot. I am so curious what Fariha is going to think of this upcoming batch of reading.
You're lucky that I have taken a very like what you call it, pacifist approach to my comic reviews these days. Even though things really makes me mad, I'm just like, I'm gonna be nice. Like,
I
I'm
will
try-
I
and
will
I'm trying,
give
people.
just
So,
try and give yourself as much as you can to Final Crisis, because I think, Peter, you nailed it when you say you have to give a lot to these books, and
Yeah.
it's totally fair if you don't want to. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but
if I
Final
come
Crisis is
with
a big
half
ask.
soul next episode, I'm going to be mad.
Yeah, your eyes
there's
start
Morrison
not much
turns
glowing.
every comic book into a potential
there's-
Horcrux.
Yeah, there's not much in there anyway, so it's not
Hey.
like I have given it all to Hickman, so
Sure.
there is not much
Yeah.
there.
All
So I'm just saying, guys.
We're doing it. It's
And all
happening.
credit to our YouTube commenter, Blue Dragon Warrior, who literally made the comment about, like, are you going to read Beyond? As Harry and I, in real time, were arguing in Facebook Messenger about if we're
Thank
going to read
you.
Behind. Good job. Way to, you totally made Harry be the one who's right. Thanks so much. So that has been all of our discussion today of Batman by Grant Morrison. Wow, there's a lot. And the reason we get together and read this, I almost hesitate to ask, but Fariha, why do we do this?
So we can find our internal Batman.
Our internal Batman. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that.
We all have a Batman inside, and then we're just trying to find that inner Batman.
Stick with me here. What if we have two Batmans inside of us? One who's inevitable and one who's implacable.
There's two Batmans inside us. The one you are, the one you feed.
Goodbye,
We're done. We're out.
Leave comment, likes, and all that YouTube. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be back next episode to talk about Final Crisis. And from Harry, Peter, and myself, this has been Crushing Comics present Batman. Bye.
Is this our best episode? That was incredible.
Wow. That's the best episode ending we've ever had.
That's the best, without a doubt.
Fariha just was like, I'm taking control of the ship.
Fariha, that was smooth as silk. You just
right?
drove it right into the station.
Right?